I said it quietly, almost to myself, because saying it any louder would have made it real. The room still smelled like coffee that had gone cold. She stood by the door with her coat half on, one hand already on the handle, the other pressed flat against her chest, like she was holding something in place. "I don't do favors," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. "Then explain last night," I replied. She didn't turn around. Not at first. There was a pause long enough for me to hear the building settle, pipes ticking, a car passing outside. I realized, standing there barefoot on the kitchen tile, that whatever she chose to say next would decide what this memory would become. A mistake, a kindness, or something we would both pretend never happened. Before that morning, my life had been orderly in a way that looked impressive from the outside and felt hollow up close. I lived alone in a narrow apartment that always smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. I woke up early, made the same breakfast, wore the same rotation of shirts. I liked knowing where everything was. It made the days pass without friction. She entered that routine quietly. We worked in the same building, different floors, different reasons for being there. We weren't colleagues in the way people usually mean it. No shared projects, no meetings, just the same elevator, sometimes twice a day. A nod at first, then a morning. Eventually a comment about the weather that went on a little too long. She had a way of listening that made you finish your sentences carefully, as if words mattered more around her. She was direct about most things, almost blunt. If she didn't like something, she said so. If she didn't have time, she didn't pretend. That was part of her reputation, the way people described her when she wasn't around. Efficient, closed off. Someone once said, "She doesn't owe anyone anything," and it sounded like praise. We started having coffee once a week, not by agreement, just by repetition. Same place near the building, same table if it was free. We talked about small things, commutes, sleep, the way the city felt louder every year. She never volunteered personal details. If I asked about her past, she redirected without making it obvious. I learned not to push. What I did learn came from observation. She drank her coffee fast, like she didn't want it to cool. She folded her napkin even when she was in a hurry. When she laughed, it surprised her, like it had escaped without permission. There was nothing flirtatious about it. If anything, it felt restrained, careful, as if both of us were aware of a line and intent on respecting it. I told myself that was enough. The night before that morning didn't begin with intention. It began with a problem. Her car wouldn't start. It was late, raining hard enough to blur the streetlights. I offered a ride without thinking. She hesitated long enough that I almost withdrew the offer. Then she nodded once and got in. The drive was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be filled. When we reached her building, she didn't open the door right away. She said she didn't like asking for help. I said I wasn't helping. I was just there. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was measuring something invisible. What happened after didn't feel dramatic at the time. It felt practical, temporary. A series of decisions made without naming them. That's what I told myself, at least, that it was nothing that needed a label, nothing that would follow us past that night. Standing barefoot in my kitchen the next morning, watching her by the door, I understood how carefully I'd edited the truth to make it fit inside my routine. The central incident didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded in pieces, each one small enough to ignore if you wanted to. After she left that morning, I went to work like nothing had shifted. Same elevator, same nods. When she stepped in on the third floor, she stood at the opposite wall, eyes forward, hands folded the way they always were. If someone had filmed us, it would have looked exactly like every other day. But there was a new awareness, a weight behind ordinary things. At the lobby, she exited without looking at me. I told myself that was normal. She wasn't demonstrative. Neither was I. The lie worked until mid-morning, when I found a note slipped under my office door. No name, just a time and the name of the coffee place we always went to. Noon. I stared at it longer than necessary. I could have ignored it. That was the clean option. Pretend last night had been what she seemed to want it to be. Unspoken, unfiled, gone. But the note existed, which meant she hadn't erased it the way I had tried to. At noon, she was already there. She didn't waste time. "We need to be clear," she said, before I'd even sat down. Her voice was calm, almost professional. "What happened doesn't change anything." I nodded too quickly. "Of course." She watched that nod the way someone watches a hand hovering near a hot surface. "I don't blur lines," she continued. "I don't mix things. I don't want this to become a misunderstanding." That word landed harder than I expected. Misunderstanding. As if last night had been an administrative error. I told her I agreed. I told her I hadn't expected anything. That it was situational, circumstantial, rain and a dead car and poor judgment. I said the right words in the right order. She relaxed, just a fraction. Enough for me to see how much effort it took her to stay composed. Then she added, "And I don't do favors." She said it the same way she might say she doesn't loan money or stay late or make exceptions. A boundary, clearly marked. I heard something else in it. I said, "That's not how it felt." The air changed, not dramatically, subtly, like a door closing somewhere else in the building. "That's the problem," she replied. "Feelings don't make things true." We sat there with our untouched coffee between us. I wanted to explain myself, but I didn't yet understand what I was explaining. All I knew was that the version of last night she was presenting didn't match the one that had kept me awake. I said something I shouldn't have. Not cruel, just honest. "You stayed." Her jaw tightened. "I needed a place to sleep." "You didn't have to." "I chose to," she corrected. "That's different." The conversation ended politely. Too politely. We parted like adults who had resolved a scheduling conflict. Back in the elevator later that afternoon, she stood beside me this time, close enough that our sleeves brushed when the car jolted. Neither of us moved away. That was when it became impossible to pretend it was over. The incident wasn't the night itself. It was the quiet agreement we were both trying to make afterward. That we could control what it meant. That we could define it narrowly enough to step around it. By the end of the week, that agreement was already failing. The pressure didn't come from arguments or confessions. It came from proximity. After that week, our schedules started bending toward each other without either of us naming it. We arrived earlier, stayed later. The elevator rides stretched. Silence became heavier than conversation. Every shared space turned into a test of restraint. She was careful in public. Precise. If someone joined us, her body angled away from mine like nothing had ever crossed that line. But there were moments, small, unguarded ones, that contradicted everything she said out loud. Her hand lingering on the edge of my desk when she stopped by under the pretense of work. The way she lowered her voice when she said my name, as if it carried weight she didn't want overheard. I told myself I was imagining it, that wanting something has a way of inventing signals. One evening, we ran into each other outside the building again. No rain this time, just dusk and the low hum of traffic. She said she was walking home. I said I was too. Our routes overlapped for exactly 3 blocks. We both knew it. Those 3 blocks took 20 minutes. We talked about nothing important. Groceries. A neighbor she found irritating. A book she hadn't finished. But every few steps, our arms brushed, and neither of us corrected for it. At the corner where our paths split, she stopped, looked at the light, then at me. "This can't keep happening," she said. I didn't argue. That was my mistake. I nodded again, like I had at the cafe. Like agreement could substitute for resolve. The next day, she avoided me completely. Different elevator, different coffee place. It should have made things easier. Instead, it made them louder in my head. Absence gave shape to what I'd been denying. By the following week, I was the one leaving notes, short ones, neutral ones, times, places. I told myself I just wanted clarity, closure, responsibility, words that sounded adult and reasonable. She ignored the first 2. The third one came back with a single line written beneath mine. Stop. I didn't. I justified it as concern, as respect, as the kind of honesty people claim to value. What it really was fear. Fear that if we didn't speak, the meaning would solidify without my input. That last night would harden into her version alone. When she finally confronted me, it wasn't dramatic. It was in a hallway between floors, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "You're pushing," she said. No anger, just fact. "I'm trying to understand." "There's nothing to understand," she replied. It was a moment. It passed. "It didn't," I said, too fast. She studied my face then, longer than she ever had. Not measuring this time, deciding. "This is exactly why I don't do favors," she said quietly. "They create debts no one agreed to." That word, debt, settled between us. I realized then how differently we had been carrying the same memory. For me, it had become a turning point. For her, a liability. I had one chance left to step back, to let her definition stand, to protect both of us from what insisting would cost. Instead, I said, "I'm not asking for anything." She smiled, just barely. That's what makes it dangerous. From that moment on, every interaction was loaded. Every silence felt like accusation. I began to see the consequence forming, not as punishment, but as inevitability. Something was going to give. Either my version of that night or my place in her life. Time wasn't on my side anymore. The moment came on an ordinary afternoon, which is how most irreversible things arrive. She asked me to meet her in the stairwell between floors. Neutral ground, out of sight, no witnesses. Her voice on the message was steady. Too steady. I knew then this wasn't another attempt at control. It was an ending looking for a shape. When I opened the door, she was already there, standing one step below me. That detail mattered. It meant she had thought about where to place herself. Her arms were crossed, not defensively, but as if holding herself still. "This stops today," she said. I waited. Saying nothing felt like the last respectful thing I could offer. "You don't hear yourself anymore," she continued. "You say you're not asking for anything, but you keep showing up like I owe you an explanation." I don't. I felt the urge to soften it, to make a joke, to lower the temperature. Instead, I did something worse. I told the truth without packaging it. "I thought it meant something," I said. There it was, out loud. No qualifiers, no safety net. She closed her eyes briefly, like someone acknowledging a pain they'd already accounted for. When she opened them, whatever tenderness I'd been hoping to find wasn't there. "That," she said, "is exactly what I can't carry." I stepped down one stair so we were level, close enough to feel the warmth of her coat. I didn't touch her. I wanted to. I didn't. "You didn't act like it was nothing," I said, not accusing. just stating a fact the way I experienced it. She nodded once. I know. That nod changed everything. It admitted the thing she'd been denying without surrendering any ground. I stayed, she said carefully. I chose to stay. That doesn't make it a promise. It doesn't make it a door. I swallowed. The stairwell hummed softly around us. Then, what was it? I asked. She looked at me then, with something close to regret. A line I don't cross again. I felt the decision forming before I understood it. Not dramatic, not brave, just final. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded note I'd written that morning, the one I hadn't left yet. Another time. Another place. Another attempt to talk. I held it out between us. She didn't take it. I unfolded it slowly and tore it once. Then again. The sound was louder than I expected. Paper tearing has a way of announcing itself. I dropped the pieces into the stairwell trash. I won't contact you again, I said. Not as a promise to her, as a line for myself. She exhaled. A real breath this time. Relief. Unmistakable. Thank you, she said. That was the door closing. Not slammed. Just shut. Firmly. By mutual recognition of what continuing would cost. I stepped back up a stair. She stepped down. We passed each other without contact. As I pushed the door open, I heard her heels resume their measured rhythm below me, each step carrying her farther away from the version of the story I'd been trying to keep alive. I didn't look back. What remained afterward wasn't heartbreak in the way people talk about it. There were no sleepless nights, no dramatic unraveling. There was just a quiet rearrangement of things I'd thought were stable. We went back to being strangers with shared geography. Same building, same elevator, different air between us. If she was already inside, I waited for the next one. If I stepped in first, she found a reason not to follow. It was efficient, clean, exactly her style. The absence showed up in small places. The coffee shop table stayed empty at noon. The stairwell felt narrower. I stopped checking my phone during pauses that no longer led anywhere. My routines reasserted themselves, but they didn't fit quite as well. Like furniture returned to its place after a move, close but not exact. I replayed the memory less than I expected. When I did, it wasn't the night itself that lingered. It was the morning after, her hand on the door, her voice steady as she said she didn't do favors. I understood it differently now. It hadn't been a dismissal. It had been a warning I'd chosen to reinterpret. Nothing about my life visibly changed. That was the strange part. No fallout. No consequences anyone else could point to. But something internal had settled into a permanent shape. A knowledge about myself. About how easily meaning can be assigned where none was offered. About how restraint can look like invitation if you're looking for it. Months later, I saw her one last time. Across the lobby, speaking to someone else. She laughed. Briefly. Involuntarily. The same sound. It didn't pull at me the way it once would have. It just confirmed something I already knew. What happened between us hadn't been a beginning or a loss. It had been a misalignment. Two truths occupying the same space for one night. Then separating the moment daylight demanded definition. I went home that evening and folded my napkin without thinking. Drank my coffee before it cooled. Paid closer attention to the weight of my own decisions. Some memories don't ache. They instruct. That one still does.